There's a city under your feet right now. It has workers, soldiers, farmers, nurses, guards, roads, alarm systems, garbage collection, nurseries, wars, even a queen. So technically, yes, it's a matriarchy. But before anyone gets too inspired, her main job is laying eggs in the dark forever, which is less girl boss and more biological printer with legs. We're talking about ants, the marching soldiers whose lifting capacity puts Arnold Schwarzenegger to shame. And here's the catch. Nobody is giving orders, nobody is holding a meeting, nobody is standing on a tiny dirt balcony yelling, "My fellow ants." Yet somehow, the whole thing still runs. Over the course of this video, you're going to watch this city go to war, farm its own food, fight its own disease outbreaks, build bridges out of its own citizens' bodies, and mark its borders with walls of its own dead. And not one single ant will understand the plan while it's happening. Here's the question I want you holding on to. If nobody's in charge, how does anything actually get decided? Let's get right to the point. Let's start with the one ant everyone assumes is running the place, shouting, "Let them eat cake." You've probably got her job wrong. Chapter 1. The Myth of the Queen. Say queen, and you picture a tiny insect monarch underground, barking orders. Send 300 workers to the sandwich, double security by the rock, invade the patio by sunrise. That's not what's happening. The queen isn't the ruler. She's closer to the colony's egg-laying engine. Her job is reproduction, not management. She creates the population. She doesn't run anyone's day. The workers are the ones actually building tunnels, finding food, raising young, and defending the nest. So from the outside, the colony looks like a monarchy. From the inside, it's something much stranger. A society with zero central boss. And that's where it gets genuinely weird. Chapter 2. A City with No Map. Imagine a city where nobody has a phone, no map, no government, no internet, no calendar, no ant knows what's happening more than a few inches from its own face. So, basically every group project. Now imagine that city still feeds everyone, defends itself, raises its young, hauls out its own trash, responds to emergencies, and expands exactly when it needs to. That's an ant colony. Every ant just follows tiny rules. Smell this, follow that, carry this, touch that ant, turn around, drop the leaf here, feed the larva, attack. One ant alone isn't much to look at. Put a single ant on your kitchen counter, and it looks like a new employee on their first day. Wandering, checking corners, pretending to know where it's going. Technically busy, not obviously productive. Put thousands of them together, and those same tiny rules turn into something else completely. One ant is a sentence. A colony is the whole book, and that book is written in a language you can't even read, or should I say, smell. Chapter 3. The Language Made of Smell. Ants don't talk the way we do. Nobody points at a crumb and announces, "Great news, the fumbling giant dropped half a cookie by the sink." Instead, ants use pheromones. Think invisible sticky notes. A scout ant finds food. On the walk home, it taps its abdomen against the ground, leaving a chemical trail behind it. An odor road laid one step at a time. Other ants pick it up with their antennae, sweeping them side to side like a metal detector, homing in on wherever the scent is strongest until it leads them straight to the source. If the second ant finds food too, it heads back and adds more pheromone. The trail gets stronger, more ants follow, more ants reinforce it. And just like that, your drop chip has a 6-lane highway leading straight to it. Here's the clever part. The trail doesn't last forever. No food left means no ants reinforcing it. No ants reinforcing it means the smell fades. And when the smell fades, the highway disappears. It's a road that only exists while it's actually being used. Humans build roads and signs on purpose once and leave them there. Ants build a live map out of smell that's constantly rewriting itself in real time. The paths that work get stronger. The paths that don't just vanish. That's not planning, it's feedback. And feedback might be one of the secret engines running every society, including ours. A restaurant gets busy, more people hear about it, the line gets longer. Now everyone assumes it must be good, so the line gets longer still. Or the shortcut across the grass that gets walked on enough times that the grass dies, and suddenly there's a dirt path nobody voted on, nobody designed, and everybody uses. People just kept doing the thing that worked, and the path wrote itself. Ants are masters of exactly that. But a system with nobody in charge has a dark side. Nobody in charge also means nobody hitting the brakes, and every so often, that runs an entire army straight into the ground. Chapter 4. The Death Spiral. Remember the rule. Find a trail, follow the strongest scent, add your own on the way home. Almost all the time, that rule is genius. It's the whole reason the highway to your cookie exists. But the rule has no fine print. It never says, unless the trail happens to be a circle. And with one particular kind of ant, that missing line turns deadly. Army ants are nearly blind. They don't really see the world. They read it by smell, marching in massive columns, each ant chasing the chemical trail of the ant in front. Usually that works flawlessly, but if a chunk of the column gets cut off and loses the main trail, something horrifying can happen. They start following each other. The ant in front follows the ant in front of it, which follows the ant in front of it, which is, eventually, following the first ant. The line closes into a loop, and now the rule that saved them turns on them. Each ant reinforces the circle. A stronger circle pulls in more ants. More ants make the scent stronger still, so they march, round and round, a spinning wheel of insects, chasing a trail that leads nowhere except back to itself. No ant can see the shape they're making. No ant is high enough, smart enough, or in charge enough to shout, "We're going in a circle. Break off." There's no one to shout it to, so they don't stop. They circle for hours, sometimes for days, round and round until they drop, one by one, and die of exhaustion. Scientists call it an ant mill. Everyone else calls it the death spiral. Over 100 years ago, a naturalist measured one of these death circles in the jungle. It was roughly a quarter of a mile around. A single ant took about 2.5 hours to complete one lap, and they just kept going, loop after loop after loop, trapped in a ring wide enough to stroll around, undone by a mistake not one of them could even perceive. The masters of the jungle, killed by the exact rule that made them unstoppable. That's the deal you make with a system that has no boss. No boss means no bottleneck, no single point of failure, no tyrant. But it also means no one is watching the whole. No one can catch the mistake that nobody was assigned to catch. The same trick that lets a colony build a living city can, in the wrong shape, march it into the dirt. Keep that one in your back pocket. We'll come back to it. Chapter 5, Border Control, Ant Style. Trails are only half of the ant's chemical world. Trails are about where you're going. The other half is about who you are, because every ant is also walking around wearing something like an identity badge. Not, "Hi, my name is Anton." More like a scent that says, "I'm from this dirt, I ride for this colony, and if you smell wrong, the whole block is coming outside." When two ants meet, they tap antennae. It looks almost polite. Two strangers introducing themselves by dapping each other up. But it isn't polite, it's an interrogation. One ant is asking, "Are you one of us?" If the smell matches, nothing happens. If the smell is wrong, the mood changes immediately. For ants, smelling wrong is an offense, which, to be fair, is also true for humans sometimes. The nest entrance isn't just a hole in the ground. It's a checkpoint, and the guards don't care what you say, they care what you smell like. This is where ants start feeling uncomfortably human. We build our own invisible lines between us and them, too. Flags, uniforms, accents, neighborhoods, team colors, different tools, same underlying question, who belongs here and who doesn't? Once that question exists in any society, conflict is never far behind. Chapter 6, When Colonies Go to War. Up to now, all of this has sounded almost cute. Tiny workers, tiny trails, tiny border checks, a little underground city running on smell. But the same system that helps ants find food and recognize family can also turn the colony into a weapon. Because if the wrong ant shows up in the wrong tunnel, the message doesn't need to be understood. It just needs to spread. One ant reacts, then another, then another. And suddenly, the city under your feet isn't a city anymore. It's a battlefield. And ant battles are not cartoon slap fights. They can be brutal. Colonies fight over food, territory, nesting space, and survival. Some raid rival nests outright, even nests of their own kind. Some steal the enemy's young, some just overwhelm rivals through sheer numbers, and some fight with weapons that sound invented. There's a group of ants in the forests of Borneo that scientists actually named the exploding ants. When an enemy gets too close and a worker can't win, it clamps on, squeezes its own body until it ruptures, and drenches the attacker in a sticky, toxic yellow goo. It kills the intruder. It also kills the ant. One life spent like a single bullet, except nobody pulled a trigger. That's just what the ant does. Now zoom out from one ant to the whole war. Picture two underground cities discovering they both depend on the same patch of land. No treaty, no negotiation, no ant diplomat sliding a folder across a table. Just contact, alarm signals, and bodies rushing toward danger. From above, it looks like a random dark smear on the sidewalk. And here's the thing. On some sidewalks, that smear never leaves. There's a kind of ant, the Argentine ant, that has quietly spread across huge stretches of the planet. In places like California, separate colonies stopped fighting each other and fused into gigantic supercolonies. Single networks of ants running for hundreds of miles. Where one supercolony ends and a rival begins, there's a line, not a fence, not a river, not a wall of stone, a wall of bodies. Along these borders, the two sides meet and fight without stopping. Not a battle that ends, a front line that just stays. Day after day, ants pour in, lock onto enemies, tear off legs and antennae, and die where they stand. On one of these fronts, researchers estimated around 30 million ants die every year, along a battle line that can run for miles. In some spots, the dead pile up so thick you could trace the exact border between two empires just by following the corpses. Sit with that. A border you could find by walking the line of the fallen, a war that has been grinding on, without a single day of peace, for longer than most countries have existed, absolutely metal, and nobody declared it, nobody commands it, nobody could call it off. It's just the us versus them rule from the last chapter, blown up to the size of a continent and paid for one tiny body at a time. And nobody has to understand the whole war for it to happen. Each ant only reacts to whatever's directly in front of it. One alarm, one encounter, one wrong smell, which should sound familiar because that's how a frightening number of human wars started too. And that's not even the craziest human comparison here, because ants also have sleeper agents. I'm not kidding. There's a species called the mirror turtle ant that basically looked at another colony and said, "Nice food supply. I live here now." Instead of fighting its way in, it disguises itself and lives inside enemy lines. But here's the twist. It doesn't fake the smell. It can't. Get close enough for a single antenna tap and the guards would know instantly, so it never lets them get that close. Instead, it copies how the host ants move, their walk, their posture, the exact way they carry themselves down the trail. It slips into their marching columns wearing that disguise, hugs the edges, dodges every guard that comes near, and rides the enemy's own scent trails straight to their food. A perfect impression, held every single step, with its life riding on nobody bumping into it. No tiny sunglasses, no fake passport, no nervous ant sweating at border control, just a body double good enough to walk through an army. In human terms, it's strolling into an enemy base wearing their uniform, matching their walk, nodding at the guards, lifting lunch from the break room, and making it back out alive, all while knowing one handshake blows the whole thing. And it works. When researchers went looking, nearly 9 out of 10 of the host colonies they checked had one of these imposters quietly living inside. But ants aren't only built for conflict and espionage. Underground, at the exact same moment, some of them are running something you'd never expect. Chapter 7. The Farmers Underground. Leafcutter ants march through the forest carrying pieces of leaves over their heads like tiny green umbrellas. If you've seen the footage, it looks like a plant is quietly taking itself apart and walking away. The obvious assumption is that they eat the leaves. They don't. Not directly. They carry the leaves underground and use them to grow fungus. The fungus is the actual food. So the ants aren't just gathering groceries, they're running agriculture. Cut the crop, carry it home, prepare it, feed the fungus garden, protect that garden, depend on it completely. And leafcutters aren't the only farmers down there. Other ants keep livestock. There are aphids, tiny sap-sucking insects that leak a sweet liquid called honeydew. Certain ants figured out they could farm that, so they herd aphids like cattle. They guard them from predators. They stroke them with their antennae to milk the honeydew right out of them. Some even carry their aphids to fresher plants and stash aphid eggs through the winter to restock the herd come spring. Crop farming and ranching, both invented by insects. Millions of years before we got around to calling it agriculture, humans spent thousands of years becoming farmers, building villages, storing food, defending fields. Ants were running their own version of that long before human farming existed. Somewhere underground right now, while we're up here arguing about grocery prices, there are ants tending gardens and milking livestock like tiny farmers who have never once taken a day off. But farming creates a new problem. When your whole society depends on a food source packed into one crowded space, you have to protect it, and that gets a lot harder when your entire civilization is breathing on top of each other. Chapter 8. When the colony gets sick. A nest is basically a crowded apartment building where everyone touches everyone, nobody gets personal space, and the walls are made of dirt. Great for teamwork, terrible for disease. So ants run something that looks a lot like public health. They groom each other clean, they haul out the waste, they physically drag dangerous material away from the rest of the nest. And in some species, a sick or dying ant will leave the colony entirely and go off to die alone, away from everyone else. Sit with that for a second. It's not sacrifice the way a human would understand sacrifice. The ant isn't being noble, but the behavior protects the colony regardless. And that's exactly where ants stop being cute and start being ruthless. The colony matters more than the individual. That's the trade. In a human story, one person usually matters. In an ant story, the colony is the main character. And once you see that, everything else about them starts clicking into place. Chapter 9, the superorganism. Scientists have a word for this. Superorganism. The ants are individuals, but together they behave like one much larger body. The queen is the reproductive system. The workers are the hands. The soldiers are the armor. The cleaners, pulling out the sick and the dead, are the immune system. The pheromone trails are the nerves. The food-sharing network is the bloodstream. The nest is the body. Once you see it that way, everything else makes a strange kind of sense. When one ant shares food mouth to mouth with another, it isn't just a snack. It's a living distribution network. Food moves through the colony. Information can move with it. Signals spread from body to body. No single ant sees the full system, but the system still knows things. It knows where the food is. It knows when danger is close. It knows when the nest needs repair, not because one brain figured it out. Because thousands of tiny interactions add up to something that looks a lot like intelligence. Which brings us to the single most fascinating thing ants do. Chapter 10. A body made of bridges. Ants aren't smart the way we're smart. They're smart together. A lone ant struggles. A colony solves problems. A lone ant is a dot. A colony is a pattern. You can see this happen in real time with army ants. If the colony needs to cross a gap, ants link their own bodies together into a living bridge. Imagine being the ant that becomes part of the road. You're walking along, then suddenly your job is floor. Other ants step over you. Traffic flows across your back. If the gap shifts, the whole structure rearranges itself. No engineer, no blueprint, no ant in a tiny vest saying, actually, this bridge isn't up to code. Just bodies responding to traffic. Worth building while enough ants are crossing. Gone the second they're not. And bridges are just the start. When the floods come, some ants don't build a raft. They become one. Fire ants, caught in rising water, grab onto each other, legs and jaws locked, tens of thousands of bodies woven together until the whole colony floats. The ones on the bottom don't even drown. Trapped air and water repelling bodies keep the whole raft dry from underneath. They can stay like that for days, sometimes weeks. A living boat with the queen and the eggs riding safe and dry in the middle, drifting until it bumps into land and the colony pours back onto solid ground like nothing happened. Nobody built the boat. The boat is the passengers. That's not just teamwork. That's infrastructure made out of citizens. Humans build answers to the same problems. Roads, because movement matters. Hospitals, because disease matters. Farms, because food matters. Armies, because territory matters. We just use concrete, steel, and a lot more complaining while nothing gets done. Ants solve the same list with chemistry, instinct, and millions of tiny bodies. Chapter 11, don't get it twisted. Time to pump the brakes, though. The comparison only goes so far. Ants are not tiny people. No dreams, no careers, no embarrassing childhood memories. No one ant insisting the colony was better back in the old tunnel. They're not sitting around wondering what any of it means. Their society isn't human society in miniature. It's something stranger. Society with the ego completely removed. No ambition, no speeches, no personal brand, no one with main character syndrome. Just rules, signals, labor, survival, and the colony. And that might be exactly why it works so well. There are an estimated 20 quadrillion ants alive on Earth right now. 20 quadrillion. That number is so big, it basically stops meaning anything. It's not just a population, it's a planet-wide presence, and some of them think bigger than any of us. Remember those Argentine ants and their walls of the dead? Their super colonies don't just cover neighborhoods. Scientists have found that the giant super colonies in California, in Europe, and in Japan aren't really rivals or even strangers. Drop an ant from one down, next to an ant from another, half a world apart, and they treat each other like family, which means, by at least one measure, a single ant society may quietly wrap most of the way around the planet, one of the largest cooperative populations on Earth, and it isn't ours, building downward while we build upward, threading tunnels through soil while we pave roads across the surface, moving seeds, turning dirt, hunting, farming, fighting, communicating in a chemical world we can't even sense. To us, an ant trail is just a line of bugs near the trash can. To them, it's logistics, transportation, communication, survival. Chapter 12, Closing the Loop. Remember the question from the start of this video, if nobody's in charge, how does anything actually get decided? Here's the real answer. It doesn't always need to be decided. It just needs enough tiny actions to line up. One ant finds food, another follows. One ant senses danger, another responds. One ant cleans, another carries. One ant feeds, another builds. Nobody ever sees the whole picture, and the picture shows up anyway. Each ant is a single brushstroke on a canvas none of them can see. And that's not just true underground. Most of us don't grow our own food. We don't purify our own water. We don't build our own roads. We don't write all the software we rely on. We don't personally fix a downed power line. Unless that's actually your job. In which case, genuinely, thank you. Also, please don't watch this while doing that. We live inside systems too large for any one person to fully understand, and on a normal day, those systems run so smoothly we forget they're even happening. We only notice the coordination once it breaks, and sometimes it does break. Remember the death spiral? Those ants weren't broken. Not one of them malfunctioned. They followed a good rule perfectly, right into the ground because none of them could see the loop they were caught in. We managed the same trick. Bank runs, stampedes, panics, bubbles, crowds of people each doing something reasonable, adding up to something nobody wanted. The coordination that builds the city is the same coordination that can spin it in a circle. That's the real thing ants reveal. Civilization was never just intelligence. It's coordination. It's trust in signals you didn't create yourself. It's thousands of small, unglamorous actions adding up to one enormous result. So next time you see a line of ants crossing your sidewalk, don't just see pests. See a city, a supply chain, a language made of smell, farmers, guards, nurses, and soldiers. A civilization that's been running under your feet this whole time, while we were up here quietly assuming we'd invented teamwork. Because ants didn't survive by being strong, they survived by becoming something bigger than themselves. And that might be the most human thing about about them, because maybe we're more of a super organism than we like to admit. Not because we think the same thoughts, not because we always agree, definitely not because we coordinate smoothly, but because every day, billions of tiny actions stack on top of each other until they become something no single person could ever build alone. A city, a power grid, a food system, a language, a civilization. Ants do it with pheromones. We do it with signals, trust, routines, jobs, roads, screens, and a worrying amount of paperwork. Different species, different tools, same strange trick. A bunch of individuals becoming something bigger than themselves. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.